Hello, men. It's good to be back here in Rambam. We're going to be doing something very important today. I want everybody to pay attention. We're going to be discussing the 100th anniversary of the Balfour Declaration as you were told. You're all very lucky to be at what I consider to be the #1 Jewish high school in the United States of America, and I will be at 4 of them in the next few days. If the men in this room are ready to go forward and use your intellect to serve our Jewish community, stand up. That's how it's going to be. But you're going to stand up with knowledge, okay? Because a lot of people are going to sow falsities about you in your history. Remember, there's no way to stop the future of the Jewish people unless they can kidnap the history of the Jewish people. Thank you. Now I want to say thanks to a couple of guys. One of them is Ken Abramowitz, who made it possible for me to come here, and along with many other individuals. Ken Abramowitz. He spends a third of his time just serving our Jewish community. He's got 2/3 to catch up to me because I spend 100% of my time doing that. I also want to thank the rabbis for their leadership in working so hard to bring me here, and that's Zev and Yotam. Thank you very much. I want to thank my chief researcher, a dozen people around the world. The one who helps me verify all my information, who's running the computer now, Eve Jones. After you've studied for a bunch of years, maybe you've come up with this much to ask her a question. Okay, now we have an organization here called the Conference of Presidents of Major Jewish Organizations, and that is Malcolm Hoenlein is the head of that. He's a friend of mine. He couldn't be here today, but he has a message for you, which is going to be read by this guy with a British accent.
Message from Malcolm Hoenlein, Executive Vice Chairman of the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations. It is my pleasure to be able to extend greetings to all those gathered to participate in this special event commemorating the 100th anniversary of the Balfour Declaration. I congratulate my good friend Edwin Black and all those who are involved in this, as well as the other initiatives, which will help counter the distortions and misrepresentations regarding the history of Israel and the events that led to the creation of the modern state. We also recall the support of the American Congress, as demonstrated in the first resolution, as well as a long record of presidents in the United States since the founding of our country in support of a Jewish state in our ancient homeland. Resurrecting the critical events of 1917 and the implications of the Balfour Declaration will help counter the lies, distortions, and misrepresentations which are aimed at undermining the legitimacy of Israel. This commemoration is a meaningful prelude to the celebration of the 70th anniversary of Israel, which we will mark in a few months. Issued October 19, 2017, New York City.
Okay, whatever you knew about the Balfour Declaration, forget about it. Now we're going to find out about the real Balfour Declaration. Now, traditionally, when you start with the Balfour Declaration, we want to go down with the lights, or yeah, let's kill the lights because we're going to be showing them. Are you okay? Okay. So, can you guys see? Can you hear? Yeah. Okay. Generally, we go back in history. You know, the Balfour Declaration was issued in 1917, right? When was it issued?
1917.
When?
1917.
They're both right, okay. November what? That's right, November, who said that? All right, I would invite you to the front of the class, but there's no room. Okay. Now, so generally we go back in history a little bit, because there's these arguments about whose grandfather was there before your grandfather. Who are the indigenous people? How far do you think we should go back?
33 centuries.
33 centuries? 3,300 years?
Yes.
Okay, what do you say?
To the beginning of the creation of Israel
The
nation.
beginning of creation, you mean 1948?
No, I meant like not Israel itself, the land. Like,
The land.
yes.
All right, you get to go to the front. You get up Okay. We'll go back 4.6 giga-years. Does anyone know what a giga-year is? What is it?
1,000 years.
Wrong. What is it? 1 billion years. Correct. We're going back to the first supercontinent, like this guy said, Balfour. Let me have it. This was the first supercontinent. I realize you can't see much on that there, but this was the first supercontinent. It was called Balfour. Now you all know that our world was created by God, and it was created as hot molten, and on top of that, there were floating plates, and those plates moved at the rate of approximately one let's say, inch or fingernail with each year, and eventually, all of these became the continents. Now, that's an artist's rendition, since we actually don't have photographs from 4.6 billion years ago. Let's go to the East African plate. So this is some plates, and never mind what looks like today. There were land masses connected, there were waters that were up, waters that were down, and this here is Israel, and this was the land in between. It was the land between Eurasia and Africa. It had a little bit of everything. It is part of nothing and a part of everything. It is the land of in between, right there. And about 300,000 years ago, in archaeological time, that is, people came out of East Africa, and they populated the world, and they walked across different ways, all over the place. And let's go to Jericho. And generally, these people, they came and went with the animals, with the herds, with the seasons. Sometimes they were in one place, they met hostile people, they fled. They were nomads. But the first place that we record, there could be some dispute about this, was 7,000 years ago, where people felt strongly enough and securely enough about their settlement to call it a city and to fight and to die to keep it there. And that is Jericho, right there. And we know that because the wall around Jericho was built and rebuilt 27 times, depending upon the defenders and the attacks. Next. And those people, 7,000 years ago, would take their ancestors and make clay heads out of them, like we would make a bust of maybe Theodore Roosevelt or Golda Meir or something, and they would bury them in their own floors. Let's just take a look at this one. That one, right? Oh, can you see my laser?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And we'll look at the image itself. All right, you can get the idea. So these are all hand-fashioned, and this was their connection with their past. Now we go to something called the Philistines. Let's go to the next. Everyone has heard the Philistines, right? Yeah. All right. Now the Philistines were not the people who today call themselves Palestinians. It's true, Palestine is from the word Philistine. Philistine comes to Hebrew meaning Plashtim, but those were Greek islanders. The Jews are from Judea, the Arabs are from Arabia, the Philistines were from the Greek islands. Not everybody who lives in Indiana is an Indian. So we need to understand that these original Philistines were not Arabs, they were Greek islanders, and the way we know that is, let's go to this one right here. Just click that, and you can just click it and it goes to an image. Okay, view the image. Just click that view image. All right, so this is from the Midinat Habu, which is Egyptian, and this is one of the largest carvings in ancient Egypt. They fought Ramses III, and in 1250 he conquered them, and he sequestered them into 5 cities in Gaza: Ashkelon, Gath, Ashdod, etc. That became Philistia. Let's go to the next one. And then, of course, one of the Canaanites was the Israelites. Now, the Israelites, unlike the Philistines, did not believe in Moloch. Does anyone here know who the god, the fake god Moloch was? Who was he?
He was an idol they sacrificed their children to.
Idol that they sacrificed their children to. They did not believe in blood sacrifice, and so they replaced all that with animal sacrifice and, of course, harvest sacrifice, which was done in the temple, of course. So the indigenous people, the people of the in-between, the people who survived, the original Canaanites who were good in the face of God, were the Israelites. Now the word Canaan, does anybody know what it means? Anybody in the room know what the word Canaan means? What does it mean?
Saying Canaanites, like people who are owned.
What does it mean? It's like in Indiana means in Indians. Does anybody know it means the color purple?
Land owned by Jews.
No, there were no kings in Canaan. There was no Canaan kingdom. There were city-states. Canaan means the color purple. And basically the Phoenicians in Tyre, in Lebanon, from the Greek term phoenikos, meaning blood red. They used to extract a little seashell, a mollusk, and in there was a purple dye. And that purple dye was used to rule all over the Mediterranean. That they would make giant sails out of it and flags. It was so hard, and because it was hard, it became valuable and expensive. And so the Phoenicians, when they used the language of the land in between was Kinana, and from Kinana, when they finally added vowels, became Canaan, and these were the people who worked with the color purple. That's all it means. Because you couldn't get from Asia to Africa without going through Canaan, and of course the Jews set up their kingdom in ancient Canaan. Let's go to the next one. And there you see a depiction of what the approximate borders of ancient Israel looked like. You could make that a little smaller. I like just a little bit.
Working on it.
Okay. Just go Control minus. A little more, so we can see my favorite restaurant in Tel Aviv. Okay. So you see, here is the Israel that you know, and here is the place that you now know as Jordan. Here's the Jordan River. By the way, remember I told you it came from it came from Asia and Africa? I show you now the Dead Sea. This is from the Asian plate. There's the Sea of Galilee. This is from the Asian plate. That's from the African plate. It's actually the jaws of the continents are spreading Israel apart at the Dead Sea and the Sea of Galilee. It's from two different ancient continents. Okay. Next, we go to the destruction of the temple. Everybody knows the temple was destroyed by the Romans. Now, a lot of times, one of the things you'll face is they say, well, there was no Jewish temple. It's just imaginary. There was a Jewish temple, of course. You've all been to the Kotel, of course. And when the Romans destroyed the temple, let's go into this one right here. Just double click on that. You don't have to open a separate link. All right, and just go view image. And we can just control plus that. And here you have the Arch of Titus in Rome today, commemorating the fact that they stole all the gold and menorahs from the ancient Jewish temple, and with that money, they built what? Anybody know? What?
They built the Arch of Titus.
With that they did. What did they do with the money? Who knows? You. They built the Colosseum, correct. So this is real. And what you're going to be faced with in this age of fake facts, fake news, Wikipedia that can go at the speed of light, you are going to have to stand up there as a warrior of information and truth backed by what is verifiable. And the reason I didn't do this in a slideshow, in a PowerPoint, is anyone will be able to find any of this on the internet with a few clicks. Okay? Now, in 627, we see the rise of Muhammad in his new religion, Islam. Has everybody heard of Mecca and Medina? Yes. Do most people in the room know that Medina was once a Jewish city, mainly Jewish city? Yes. Yes. And you know what Medinat means, right? It's Hebrew for the state. Correct. Where's the guy from the Five Towns paper? Did you know that Medina comes from the Hebrew word Medinat? Okay. We don't need to embarrass him. All right. Close the lights. So, Muhammad comes up with his new religion, not 3,000 years ago, not 2,000 years ago, but 1,400 years ago, and let's see it. And this is known by scholars as the Muslim conquest. And you see, they come up from right around here. Now, what is an Arab? Can anyone define an Arab? Yes, what's an Arab?
Someone from the Arabian Peninsula.
That's correct. That's perfect. An Arab is a descendant of the Arabian Peninsula, plain and simple. So what are they? They were mainly marauders. So what does that mean? That means they slept outside. If you sleep outside in Arabic, they call you Badu. If there's three of you, they say you're Badawin. From Badawin came Bedouin. And that is how the Arabs developed their culture. Me against my brother, me and my brother against my cousin, me and my brother and my cousin against the world. Okay? They robbed and stuff because there were nomads. That was just the way that they did it. And you see that they went all the way up here, all the way to Spain. Now they went this way. Notice that they didn't go below here. Now, how come they didn't go below this line? Who wants to bet? Why?
The Sahara Desert.
The Sahara Desert, that's half correct.
That was where the Jewish state was.
The Jewish state was wrong. There's no Jewish state here. Who else has got a reason, an explanation? Go ahead. You.
Because there's not much there to go get.
Well, there was plenty there to go get. Tsetse flies. They couldn't bring their camels and their cattle down below. This is the tsetse fly line. So what happened is, this was the invention at that time, in that place, of commercial slavery as we know it. There had always been slavery in all the religions going back thousands of years based on military conquest and economic disadvantage. You know, a Jewish slave must be freed every 7 years or every 50 years, correct? You're aware of that. And the word slave should not be confused with the word indentured servant. And of course, in the Jewish tradition, if you owned a slave, you only owned his labor, not his human being. So what happened is, a Muslim could not be made a slave. So because they couldn't get down here with a military conquest, they did not convert all these people, and so all these people became slaves. So there was slavery in America, correct? How many slaves were kidnapped into America? Who knows? What's a lot? How many?
At least 10.
At least what?
Like 1,000.
1,000? Let's get serious. How much?
3 million?
3 million. 388,000. 388,000 human beings were stolen from their families. They were like shtetls, if you will, but they were in Africa. And they were kidnapped into North America. But before they did that, for 1,000 years before they did that, 15 million were abducted, kidnapped from here, and as slaves throughout the Middle East to drive the expansion of the caliphate. And the mortality rate was 50 to 70%, and they didn't want them to reproduce, so they invented something called a eunuch, where they castrated the guy, and 70% of those guys bled out. Now, the Arab slave trade is something is one of the next 5 books that I'm working on, and so is Eve. So, that's the extent of so when they say we are the indigenous people of right there, that's not the case. They're latecomers, they're conquerors. Doesn't mean they don't have a right to be there, but they're not the original indigenous people. And because people can't go back far enough, I just took you back to the continents, to tectonic times. Next.
Get a second image of the Muslim expansion.
All right, so this is a second image. These are all taken from various universities. So this is a second image of these various attack mechanisms where they conquered lands. Next. Eventually, we have the Turkish Muslims, and it's called the Ottoman Empire. Has everybody in the room heard of the Ottoman Empire? Yes. Good. Raise your hand and leave the room if you have not heard of the Ottoman Empire. Okay, we're safe. Is there some guy back there who didn't hear about it? Okay. So here we see that the Ottoman Empire spreads, and it includes that. And that's what it looked like in 1683. That's another one. Let's go to the next one. And this is the land of in-between, the land that used to be called Israel and was renamed Syria-Palestina by the Romans to remind the Jews that they will never have a national identity again. It wasn't because the people living there were Arabs. It was because they named them for their exact enemy. And you see, these are what they called sanjaks and vilayets. These are like provinces. This was Zor, Aleppo, Beirut, Syria, and the Mudas Tarif of Jerusalem. Taking you all the way back, kids. All right. Now, who owns all the land? And the Turks had this for 400 years, almost a half a millennium. Who owned all the land? Who knows? Who owned all the land in Ottoman Empire? Do you know? Do you know? Do you know? Do you know?
Turks?
Who?
Arabs.
Arabs? No. Turks are not Arabs. Turks are Eurasians. Don't confuse Arabs with Turks, and don't confuse Iranians with Arabs. They're different people, but they share a religion. The Sultan, the king, the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire owned everything. He owned all of the land. So in the 19th century, that's in the middle of the 1800s, there was a move to bring democracy or local self-rule into the Ottoman Empire. A guy by the name of Midhat Pasha was one of the pashas who said, why can't we be more like the United States, like England, like France, have individual rights? And he said, well, what would help? It would help if people could own their own land. And so on April 29th of 1859, they passed the Ottoman Land Registration Act. Let's go. And let's make it bigger. Control plus. If you, all right, we'll keep it there.
It doesn't want to go.
All right, so that's the Ottoman Land Registration Act, which governed 80% of Palestine. Now, the Ottoman Land Registration Act had laws in it that were modeled after the same laws we have in Maryland and New York and many other places. They said if you don't work land, you cannot lay ownership to it. So they said you can register your land as long as you do not leave it fallow for 10 years. Why? They didn't want people coming out, standing in front of their door and say, I own this land from here to the mountaintop and from here to the water. So they had to own and work the land. Otherwise, it would be reduced, and listen to this, to public lands and state lands and wastelands not needed for public use, meaning sovereign property, like a state park or the government owns a piece of property. Well, certainly I can tell you that the Arabs who were living there were in the lowlands. They were where the streams were, where the herds could be pastured, where the crops could be grown. They weren't in the rocky tops, and that land was always open, and one that later the Zionists took a hold of. So when they passed this law over the entire Ottoman Empire, on 3 continents, within 2 years, guess how many registrations they had for the whole Ottoman Empire? Who wants to guess? You. How many? 100. How many? 300. 300? How many?
1,000.
2. Now how come they only had 2? Because nobody wanted to register their land. 90% of the land registrations, and I've looked at a bunch of them, were fraudulent. Because once you registered your land, you had to pay what?
Taxes.
Taxes. And one of your sons would have to go into the what?
Army.
Army. So nobody wanted to say, I own the land. So it was owned by the sovereign country of the Ottoman Empire and was there. Oh, by the way, all these land registrations, no maps, no surveys, no pictures. Guy just walks in and says, I own the land from this tree to that stream. So none of the ideas that the rest of the world would consider a proper registration identification of land. So now we're going to move up to 1914. Oh, I'm sorry. This is what Jerusalem looked like in 1900. And you can see how that's from the Library of Congress. You can see how empty it is. There was always a Jewish majority in Jerusalem. And the Jewish majority in Jerusalem, right after that time, was approximately double the population of the Arab and Muslim minority. How many people did they have? They had 33,000 Jews?
Something like that.
How many Arabs? 16,000, okay.
Don't take that as gospel.
All right, but the rest of Palestine, these little hamlets and stuff, made the Jewish population in the minority. So they were the majority in Jerusalem. Now we go to 1914. War. Everybody heard of World War I? If you did not hear of World War I, raise your hand. If you did hear of World War I, raise your hand. Okay. So we got war. Now, this means that the main combatants are Germany and Turkey against Britain, France, a bunch of other countries, and also Russia's on the side of them. The U.S. comes in late. Next. During this time, little known to most people, I put up a Wikipedia, not because Wikipedia is reliable, but even Wikipedia knows that 16,000 Jews were kicked out on Passover by the Turks from Palestine. And it was done by one of the pashas at the same time that this pasha was executing the mass murder of 1.4 Armenians. And the original idea was to exterminate the Jews, and they were talked in through diplomatic personnel into just throwing them out. Let's go here. That one right there, the next one. And we see that the Central Zionist Archives now actually has a little collection devoted to this. Why is this important? Not only were the Jews returning from centuries ago, they were returning from 12 months ago. Because they were thrown out for no other reason than they were Jews. And they were evacuated, by the way, by United States military medical ships to Cairo and other places. So now, eventually we go to, well, let's go with one more picture, the next picture. There they are, there are the Jews going on to ships to be expelled from Tel Aviv and Jaffa. It was a ghost town. Tel Aviv was a ghost town. They were all thrown out. The next one.
The next one is us coming to the war.
All right. U.S. enters the war. Now, why did the U.S. enter the war? U.S. entered the war for a number of reasons. Oh, you want to make a contribution? Why did the U.S. enter the war? Who knows? Go ahead.
We intercepted the Zimmerman telegraph.
You're training your kids real good. That's right, the Zimmerman telegraph. Now you're ahead of me by 5 minutes. That's perfect. That wasn't the only reason, but that was one of the reasons. What's the other one? You.
The sinking of several civilian ships by the Germans.
Look at this guy. He didn't say the sinking of the Lusitania, which was earlier. He said the sinking of several ships, which was later. That's correct. Thank you very much. Let's hear it for that guy. Now listen. He mentioned the Zimmerman telegram. Who in the room besides this guy, this Chochem, knows what the Zimmerman telegram was? Go ahead.
It was Russia telling Mexico to attack America.
Not even close. It's half close. Was it?
I'm not sure.
You're not sure. Germany sends a note to the Mexicans and said, if you'll fight for us in this war against America, we'll give you back half of the country you lost after the Mexican-American War of 1848, Treaty of Hidalgo, when we got Texas, we got New Mexico, Arizona, California, and suddenly a bunch of people said, wow, we got half of Mexico. Look at all these Mexicans, what are they doing here? So the point of the matter is, that was the Zimmerman telegram. And that is why America, one of the reasons, plus the sinking of those ships, entered the war against Germany, but not against Turkey. And that is why Woodrow Wilson, who was so important to the League of Nations, was cautious about giving a letter like the Balfour Declaration to the Zionists, because he didn't want to give a letter to Turkey that was similar to the letter that Germany gave to Mexico. Good call over there. All right, next. All right, so it's June 4th, 1917. That is not the Balfour Declaration, but it goes to Sokolov from the World Zionist Organization. That's before the Balfour Declaration. When you come out of here, you're going to find out that the Balfour Declaration was not a gift of one man from one country to one people. It was an international effort by the Japanese, the Chinese, the Americans, the French, the Germans, to recognize Jewish nationalism in the Middle East. And this is a letter that is similar to the Balfour Declaration, but not quite strong enough, done by French Foreign Minister Cambon. Now, Balfour was the Foreign Minister of England. By the way, this brings us to why these countries were recognizing Jews and other groups. Does anyone here know about what a two-word definition for Zionism is? What is it?
Support of Israel.
Support of Israel. Nope. What is it?
Jewish state.
Jewish state. Close. What is it?
Nationalism.
Jewish nationalism. Give this guy a hand. Because at the end of the 19th century, all these groups oppressed in colonies throughout the Middle East and in Africa by Germany, they all had this desire to identify themselves based on their religion, their geography, their culture, their history, their language, whatever it was. And they were to be recognized in a concept called self-determination. Determine your own affairs. You're in Africa, don't ask Berlin what to do. You're in Jerusalem, don't ask Istanbul what to do. So they recognized that all of these minority groups could be used against the Turks in the war. When you're talking about the Balfour Declaration, it's not just one explanation. It's not just one reason. It's several. Some of them are good reasons, some of them are bad reasons, some of them are noble, some of them are the last ones we want to recognize. One of the noble ones was self-determination. One of the less noble ones was Bolshevism. Who knows what Bolshevism is? Raise your hands. Who knows what Russia is? All right, there were millions of Jews in Russia, correct? And who was trying to kill them?
The Tsar.
That's correct, the Tsar. And the Tsar, what is Tsar, which is Russian, what does that mean?
He is a dictator.
And what does it come from? From what word?
I'm not sure.
Caesar. So the Russian version of Caesar is Tsar. Okay? So if you ever have a Tsar salad, it's like a Caesar salad. Okay. So the Tsar wanted to kill a third. He wanted to capture a third and I think starve a third. And there were the pogroms, the ones that you know about, where they come in with the horses. So the Jews wanted to get rid of this oppression. Now, as we all know, what happens in history, when you unseat the oppressor, it's replaced with another oppressor. But in this case, there were many Jews being oppressed in Russia, and Russia was on the verge at that moment of quitting the war and the Bolshevik Revolution to unseat the Tsars and to take control. And if the Russians quit the war, then there would be no Russian front, and the ability of the main powers of the United States, England and France to fight the Germans would be greatly diminished. So let's go to the next one. And we got here Lenin. Now Lenin, does everybody know who Lenin was? And don't tell me he was a Beatle. Who was Lenin? Who? You're going to say the Beatles? Who? Who was Lenin?
He was a communist.
Right, he was the communist leader, not the Marxist leader, but the communist leader. And that means that the state controls everything. And Lenin was at that time, that is taken from the spring of 1917, and they're rallying the masses, and they're getting ready to overthrow the Tsar. Now let's go to October 25th of 1917. Actually, right. Let's go to the next one.
The next is,
All right, it's that one. These are the Germans. You see their little funny hats? And these are the Russians. You see their little fur hats? And they're having a meeting already to talk about the Russians quitting World War I. That'll be the end of World War I for the Allies. Let's go to the next one. And right about that time, as the Russians and the Germans are having their talk in Brest-Litovsk, Woodrow Wilson gives a private assurance to Stephen Wise. He was the head of the American Jewish Congress. Anyone heard of Stephen Wise? Raise your hand. No? You should read my book, The Transfer Agreement, if you have the chutzpah and you learn about it. So, Stephen Wise was the head Jewish leader of the Jewish people in the United States. He was democratically elected because at that time the American Jewish Congress, they were mainly formed from working class Jews, from Eastern Jews, from Russian Jews, and the American Jewish Committee and B'nai B'rith, they were German Jews, and they had a tendency to side with Germany, and they did not want to oppose Germany because they feared of their own kinship. So President Wilson gives a private assurance, October 1917, to Stephen Wise. He wouldn't make it public because he didn't want the Zimmerman telegram effect. And this brings us to the Balfour Declaration. Is that all right? This is Talat Pasha. So Talat Pasha is also, he's the head of the Ottoman Empire, one of the heads, one of the pashas, and he is telling the Jews, we will give you your aspirations if we win this war, because they want the Jews on their side. In the same way that the British wanted the Arabs on their side to attack the trains, like in the movie Lawrence of Arabia, the Turks, the Germans, the British, the French, they wanted the Jews on their side because A, the Jews were being massacred, B, they had this fear, this imaginary distortion that Jews controlled a lot of money and they could help win the war, and part of that was based on the fact that the Jewish bankers would not finance Russia, instead finance Japan in its earlier war, and another reason, of course, was self-determination. Wilson was a missionary type of person. He believed in Bible study. He believed in the Jews. So there are many, many reasons, not just one. And there was another reason. The British wanted to be able to go from the Suez Canal directly across the Sinai, across Egypt, across Palestine, through the Middle East, right into India, where they had a major colony. So there are lots of different reasons. And I bring this out so you'll understand that this was a world community working on diplomacy there, because the Zionist organization had French Zionists, German Zionists, Turkish Zionists, Chinese Zionists, American Zionists. Everybody was working in diplomacy because the concept of Zionism, going back to Herzl, was that the Jews must have a Jewish homeland that is legally obtained under international sanction. No one gave it to the Jews. We made it ourselves, but we made it under international principles. All right, that takes us finally to the Balfour Declaration. Let's make it bigger if we can. You know how to make that big? No, that's the wrong way. You're close. All right, here it is. Let's discuss these words. 67 words and what they mean. So, you guys on the TV sets, I hope you can follow along with me. This was done to Lord Rothschild. It was not done to the Zionist organization because the British at that time didn't want it to look like they were favoring one side of the war or the other. And so he wrote it to a prominent Jew, Lord Rothschild. He said, I have much pleasure in conveying to you on behalf of His Majesty's government. By the way, this piece of paper has no value as a legal instrument. It's not binding. It's just pretty stationary. The following declaration of sympathy with Jewish Zionist aspirations, which has been submitted to and approved by the cabinet. There were many revisions, many authors, many drafts, many debates, what could have been, would have been, and should have been. But that's the letter that came out of it. That's diplomacy. He says, His Majesty's government views with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. Now, why did they not use the term a state, a national state? Why?
Because Israel wasn't a state yet. It was not recognized as a state yet. It was just
But they were trying to recognize Arab states and Kurdish states and Armenian states. Why do you think?
well, because the war was still going on. They didn't want to like.
All right. The reason is because everybody knew that the Jews have been expelled from one place to the next. And if they said, this is your state, then they would just say, get out of my country and go there. So they called it a national home. And that word was actually coined not by Balfour, but by Nachum Sokolov of the World Zionist Organization as a compromise. Will be a national home for the Jewish people and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done. Read it again. Nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights, read those words, of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine. Arabs, Christians, Muslims, Shia, Sunni, Druze, Christian Templars, Kurds, many different groups. Residence is residence and sovereignty is sovereignty. And it says here, or the rights and political status enjoyed by the Jews in any other country. That means a Jew is free to continue being a British Jew, a New York Jew, a Miami Jew, a French Jew, or he could seek his national aspirations under international sanction, as was foreseen. And so this means no Palestinians are mentioned, because in these days, the Palestinians were the Jewish Zionists. Remember that. Until 1964, the Arabs did not call themselves Palestinians. Got that, news guy? In 1964, the Arabs, the Jews had a switcheroo. They changed their name from Palestinian to Israeli. And in 1964, the Arabs reinvented their national identity from Arab to Palestinian. Not indigenously, not 1,000 years ago, not generations ago in 1964. Okay, so this means that only the Jews get national rights. Why? Because the Arabs got national rights in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Transjordan, the Arabian Peninsula that became Saudi Arabia. They said, so we'll keep this little shtickle for the Jews. They have a majority in Jerusalem, and they will have their part. But there's one important ingredient that was never done in the Middle East before. Civil rights. Arabs, Christians, Jews did not have equal rights under Ottoman rule. And so this is an attempt to bring democracy into Israel. And nobody's status is compromised. No religious status, no civil rights status. Don't confuse residence with sovereignty. We got Hasidim in this town, in this metropolitan area, we have Christian communities, Greek Orthodox, many different communities that have civil rights, equal rights. But only as Americans, as a collective, do they have national rights. All right, next. Now, that concept was actually hastened by the fact that the Zionists brought him the French letter and said, look, the French have already gone down with this. It's time for you to do it. He said, okay, we'll do it. And that immediately led to the Germans doing it. The Germans who were at war and the allies of the Turks. That there is the German Foreign Ministry, Hilmar von dem Buschi Hattenhausen of the Foreign Ministry, and he sent a message conveying the Turkish recognition of Zionist aspiration, which they didn't want to do, which they had refused to do, but they knew it was time to give it up. And the phrase was, with regard to the endeavors of the Jewish community and of the Zionists, we welcome the recent statement of Talat Pasha, who I showed you his picture before, particularly the intention of the Imperial Ottoman government to promote a flourishing of Jewish settlement in Palestine within the country's absorptive capacity. And it goes on. I want you to understand that this falsity that Great Britain was giving away the land of one country, was giving away the land of another country to a third country, is totally false. Because the Balfour Declaration did not stand alone. It was a beacon of light in a galaxy of shining objects declaring the same concept. If you walk away with nothing more, you'll walk away with that. And that brings us to the, that was given on January 5th of 1918. And then we go to the French Declaration, closest to the Balfour Declaration, given on February 18th, 1918. And that said, once again, with regard that the government and of France, with the Zionist, with the vis-a-vis the Zionist aspirations tending to create for the Jews in Palestine a national home, has published a note in the press. These were public statements, and it basically said, we also believe in the same essence, I won't read it all to you, as the Balfour Declaration. So remember, there was a series of undertakings with the Arabs called the McMahon Correspondence. Those were secret, they were inconclusive. All these were published, they were part of the public record, they were debated for years, and all of these were set forth for everyone to see and debate again. And nobody doubted for a minute it would be a Jewish state. One of the antagonisms, the arguments against the Balfour Declaration, was it would lead to a Jewish state. All right, we then go to August, to the next one. Woodrow Wilson again, August 31, 1918. Woodrow Wilson now makes a private declaration to Stephen Wise of the American Jewish Congress, who doubled as one of the leaders of the Zionist organization in the world, and he said, I endorse the Balfour Declaration, which was actually sent to Wilson to approve before it was issued. No one was going to do this by themselves. This was all part of an international movement to recognize self-determination for the Jews. And that brings us to the Japanese statement. And there we go. Yasuya Uchida, the foreign minister of Japan.
No, that is Chinda Sutemi.
All right, that's Uchida. I'm sorry, you got it wrong. You're right, it's Chinda Sutemi, the true foreign minister at the time. He said the Japanese government gladly takes note of the Zionist aspiration to extend in Palestine a national home for the Jewish people, and they look forward with a sympathetic interest to the realization of such desire. He succeeded, Yasui Uchida, the next guy, who says the same thing. Now, how come the Japanese love the idea of an Israeli state? Anyone in the room beside Rabbi Yotav and Rabbi Zed know what the Fugu plan was? Anybody here know?
She does.
She does, of course she does. Do you know what the Fugu plan was? The Fugu plan was a plan to make a Jewish state like Palestine and Manchuria as a gesture to the Jewish people because of their oppression with the Tsar. And it will be recalled that the German Jewish banker Jacob Schiff financed the Japanese victory in 1905 at Tsushima Strait, which allowed the Japanese military to defeat the vaunted Russian Navy, which was the beginning of the end. So this was not a nobody. Here he is on the cover of Time magazine. All right? And now we're going to go to January 3rd, 1919. Next one, right there. What do we got here? We got Faisal. Faisal is the king of Iraq. Now, who made the king of Iraq? Who do you think made the king of Iraq? The king of England.
The King of England.
That's right, the king of England made the king of Iraq. If you're a king, it's good to be the king, and you can make little kings. And so that there is Faisal, 1919, January 3rd. By the way, the Japanese were in attendance at the San Remo conference, which I'll explain to you later. There he is. And who is this guy? Anybody know? Who? This is not the king of Iran. He wishes he was the king of Iran. Who is it? Who says Chaim Weizmann? Chaim Weizmann trying to look like an Arab guy, he does not look very Arab here. And he's cutting an agreement with Faisal. Faisal, on the eve of the peace conference, to figure out who's going to have national destiny. And this guy, Faisal, who is being rewarded by the British for attacking the trains in the Sinai Peninsula, this guy says, we don't want Palestine, we want Syria. You can have Palestine, as long as we get Syria. And so and he was actually elected by the Second Syrian Democratic Congress to represent the Arab people's Arab nationalism. And they signed a contract, and it was witnessed by this guy. Who is that? Lawrence of Arabia. And there's his little knife there to show what a heavy guy is, and there's his knife there. He doesn't have a knife, he has a tie. So they make an agreement in 1919. Let's see the agreement. And there's the agreement. Chaim Weizmann and a special notation by Faisal. And it says in Arabic. Anybody can read that in Arabic? I guess not. Let me see what it says. It says, you can get what you want as long as we get what we want. But they didn't get what they wanted. They wanted Syria, and they didn't get that. So what happened was, here's something your college professors will not teach you, okay? You will not hear this from your college professors. And that is that they actually made a Syrian state in Jordan. Let's see if we're there yet. Yes, we have, well, let's first go right there. That is the Paris Peace Conference, January 18th, 1918. That's Faisal, one of the main guys. Here is one of the Japanese guys, and here are various, this is Lawrence of Arabia, and they're posing for that shot. And the British said, you Arabs get your own state in Syria, and the Jews get their state. And the French said, we don't go for that. It's okay with the British, but it isn't okay for us. And so the French stopped the peace that could have been, that never was, in 1919. Now we go to the Covenant of the League of Nations. And we go to Article 22. Right there, lower. All right, good. Now, pay attention, folks. Make that a little bigger. Can you? You know how to make it bigger?
I don't know if it'll wrap it.
All right. It says here, good. All right, little lower. right, to those colonies and territories which as a consequence of the late war have ceased to be under the sovereignty of the states which formerly governed them. We're dismantling the Ottoman Empire. They used to say we're carving up Turkey. And they intended to make little states everywhere. There are a lot of reasons. Self-determination, making good on a pledge, oil. They wanted to take over the oil fields of the Middle East. Lots of reasons. But this is how they expressed it. And they were going to, those communities formerly belonging to the Turkish Empire have reached a stage of development where their existence as independent nations can be provisionally recognized, subject to their being under a mandatory mandate Palestine, mandate France. Let's go to the next one. All right, let's go to the next one after that. And there we see something called the Arab Kingdom of Syria. This was an actual country. That was their coinage. Let's go to the next one. That was their dollars. And apparently we've missed part of this, but we'll fix it for the next lecture tomorrow. But the fact of the matter is that they actually had their own Arab nation for 6 weeks. The French kicked them out, and because the Arabs were not allowed to set up their state, their kingdom, they said, then you'll never get the Jewish state as well. A deal is a deal. And that brings us to the San Remo Conference. And here we see the Japanese guys, and here we see the British and the French. And they're meeting in San Remo on April 26, 1920, to figure out where the oil pipelines go and where the land boundaries go. Next. And this is the San Remo Convention. See, we can find this all on the internet. The San Remo Convention, we will go to Article 6, please. Right there. Now listen up, guys. It says here, the administration of Palestine, let's have you read this.
Administration of Palestine, while ensuring that the rights and position of the other sections of the population are not prejudiced.
Wait a minute, that sounds just like the Balfour Declaration, right?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Shall facilitate Jewish immigration under suitable conditions and shall encourage, in cooperation with the Jewish agency referred to in Article 4, close settlement by Jews.
Did you say settlement?
So I say settlement.
Settlement by Jews on what?
On the land.
Including?
State lands and wastelands not required for public purposes.
That means the land owned by the government of Turkey under the Ottoman Land Registration Act, which was not private property, which could be given away under the vanquish of the international community. Now notice here, it says, shall recognize a Jewish agency. Where is that? Come down a little bit. We go to 6. Right there. In cooperation with the Jewish, a suitable Jewish agency. Notice there's a small a there. What is the name of the Jewish agency that they have in mind? Go up to Article 4. The Zionist organization is the recognized agency under international law. Let's hear it. And so what did they do? They said, we'll take the Jewish agency with a little a, and we'll make the Jewish agency with a big A. That's how we got the Jewish agency from that clause. That means that the Zionist organization is just not being run by a guy in Philadelphia. The Zionist organization was recognized by 52 countries that adopted the San Remo Convention. All right, let's continue. And what was the mandate for Jewish Palestine? Here it is. This is the mandate for Jewish Palestine. British mandate, 120,000 square kilometers. You see, it goes all the way there to Iraq, where the Brits had their mandate. It goes all the way to here, to Arabia, goes all the way to here. And what happens after that? Let's go to number, all right. And this, we'll go back to the earlier one. Right there. And in 1922, Winston Churchill cut off 77% of Jewish Palestine and gave it to create another Arab state called Transjordan. He didn't do it with a plebiscite. He didn't do it with a vote. He didn't do it with a referendum. He did it with a memo. He sent a memo and said the full amount of territory that the Jews had, we're going to cut it off by 3/4, and now they're just left with this little thing. So now we have Syria, we have Lebanon, we have Iraq, we have Transjordan, we have Egypt, we have Saudi Arabia. And who is the king of Transjordan? Abdullah. Who's Abdullah's brother? Faisal. He's the king of Iraq. So the king of England puts 2 new kings in, but they're not from Iraq. They're not from Transjordan. Where are they from? They're from down here. They're Bedouins. From down here, they're Hashemites, which means they believe in Hashem, they believe in God. They're from Arabians, but they were attacking the trains. He said it's a gift to attacking the trains. You couldn't get Iraq the way we promised, because Syria, because the French kicked you out, and now you get 2 consolation prizes. And this was all that was left for the Jews. I just want you to understand that Transjordan no one was in ancient Jordan before 1922. Let's go to the next one. All right, and this is the actual Treaty of Peace. Is this Severs?
Yes.
All right, chapter 95. This is the Treaty of Peace with Turkey. Just scroll down. How we doing? 10 minutes, we'll stop. Okay, you got Article 21, keep going down. Go Article 95. Keep going. All right, we don't have the time to find it, but it basically says the same thing as the Balfour Declaration. This, signed by all these countries, incorporated the exact wording of the Balfour Declaration. So now we have a simple piece of paper that gets elevated to the San Remo agreement, gets elevated to the mandate for Palestine, gets elevated to the ultimately, and there it is. Can you make that bigger? That's it, hit that plus a few more times. All right? And there is the language. National home for the Jewish people, being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities. Now, because we're running out of time, I'd like to jump, if you will, to the UN Charter, Article 80. That is number 45. All right, let's go to Article 80. All right, make it bigger. Control plus. A little more. And what does it say here? Except that this is in the UN Charter. Except as may be agreed upon in individual trusteeship agreements. Each territory, until such agreements have been concluded, meaning the mandate for Palestine, the San Remo Agreement, the essence of the Balfour Declaration. Until they've been concluded, nothing in this chapter shall be construed in and of itself to alter in any manner the rights whatsoever of any states or any peoples or the terms of any other existing international agreements. And that is because there were no Palestinians at that time with national rights except the Jewish Palestinians, and they were called Zionists. So now we will go to what the Arabs did as a result of that. And that would go to number 46. Immediately, in broad daylight, even the JTA knows about it, if you can imagine that. They are gonna come up with, this is before 1950, it's in 1946. And so what they're gonna, is it 46 or 48? 48, before Israel becomes a state, we're gonna seize all the Jewish property of 1 million Jews in every Muslim country. We're gonna take it and we're gonna evict them and make them stateless people. All right? Next. And in the New York Times, Jews in grave danger in all Muslim lands. May 16th, 1948, 900,000 in Africa and Asia faced the wrath of their foes. You don't hear about these refugees. The newspapers don't write about those refugees. But these people were in their countries for 27 centuries before this, and for 1,000 years before Muhammad. Next. And they're kicked out. They're put on planes, stateless, and they're flown to Israel. Day and night, day and night. Those are Yemenite Jews. Show us the next one. And here they are getting into these trucks. They took the scarves from their neck. They took the rings from their fingers, the earrings from their lobes, and they were flown day and night. And what is the name of the airline that secretly flew them day and night? Who knows? El Al, forget about it. All they had was a staircase. Who did the flying? Alitalia, Air Alaska. Air Alaska did the flying. All right, next. And then what happened, make that large. Control plus that, please. No, the Palestine. Here we go. I want the journalists here to see this. This is the Palestine National Council. Even Wikipedia knows. Come down a little bit. One little more. Right there. They started in 1964. Can you go up a little more? Up a little higher. All right, it's lower, excuse me. Right there, 1964. Suddenly, the Arabs rebrand themselves as Palestinians. They aren't the indigenous people. They aren't the original Philistines. And they said, we're now Palestinians. And they didn't own the land because the Turks owned the land, and the Jews had it recognized internationally. Let's go to the next one, please. What number? Okay, that's the Palestinian National Charter. All right, let's go to the next one. We have to wrap it up. Next one, please, Palestine. And here we go. Make that big. Yeah, real big. Right there. All right, what does that headline say?
Arabs to boycott Palestinian goods.
Arabs to boycott Palestinian goods. The Jews are the Palestinians. And they've been telling them the opposite. And I got another 30 of them behind me, just like that, but the rabbi won't let me keep you here until midnight. All right, listen. I could have done more, but I want to make sure that when you guys go to college, you know more than all your professors about this topic. I want to make sure that when some guy says, who are the indigenous Jews of Palestine and Canaan, you tell them who it was. Thank you very much, ladies.